Hey everyone, my name's George and welcome to the Nirvana Sessions. Today we have the absolute pleasure of spending some time with Jim White from Aesthetix Audio Corporation in California. We've been listening to audio equipment for many years, and when we discovered Aesthetix, it really impressed us, and meeting the man behind the product has been even more impressive. So Jim, welcome
Thank you.
to Nirvana. Thanks for making the effort to come all the way to Australia and spend some time with us. And we hope you've enjoyed your time here so far.
It's been amazing, fantastic.
It's certainly been great meeting you and getting to know you, absolutely. We discovered your equipment a few years ago, and I just made a lasting impression, as often happens when you hear a particular sound that resonates with you. So congratulations for the wonderful work you've been doing, and I think you've been doing it now for 30 years or
On that scale, yeah.
on that scale.
Yeah.
Well, we love the sound and welcome. So hopefully
Thank
we
you.
can
It's wonderful
get
to
to know
be
you.
here.
So today you have a wonderful facility in Moore Park in California, and you're distributing to 27 different countries around the world, but it wasn't always that way. So if you take us back to the beginning, I think after you finished some education in mathematics and physics, and I think you also did electronics engineering.
Actually, no.
No?
No electronics.
No
All the
electronics?
electronics is self-taught. Definite math and physics background, and I concluded that audio engineering isn't taught at university,
Yeah.
and so I really devoted myself to that personally.
Yeah.
And I had an environment at Theta Digital
Yes.
that fostered that.
So take us back to Theta Digital. How did that come about?
Well, I had a young family, and I went to work, and Mike Moffat hired me,
Mm-hmm.
and as an assembler, and I was assembling the Theta DS Pro Gen 3s and all the different DACs. And he saw that I was ambitious and I would stay late and study. And uh, he uh, he had a company before Theta Digital that was Theta. We wouldn't say analog; it was just Theta.
Yes.
And he made vacuum tube preamps, and he had also been modifying Dynacos and Harman Kardon Citation 3s and a wide variety of products. And so he kind of gave me those projects
Yeah.
to continue on. And so that sort of benevolence and generosity toward me really fostered my growth.
Really wonderful mentoring.
It really,
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic.
We'll come back to the lack of electronics engineering training, because I think that's a big part of the reason why your equipment sounds so good. But I think having gotten to know you a little bit over the last few days, I would say the reasons for your investment in this career are more to do with loving music than they are with equipment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say certainly to a large degree. From a young age, music had a huge impact on me. In my family, there are musicians. My grandfather was a clarinet player, and he had jazz bands in the Spokane area. And he was practicing every morning at 6 a.m. No matter what, he would be downstairs practicing. And so, and along with that, my mother and father were very into music, and so music was always in my life.
When did you realize that you were one of those weird guys that it just affected you so much?
I don't know that I can pinpoint a specific moment.
Yeah.
I just knew it was in me.
Yeah.
And I really attribute it to just a family that embraced music.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, like all great brands, it all usually begins in someone's garage. I think in 1993, you had completed building a phono stage called the IO. So maybe take us back to that time and what sort of how it all happened, where people discovered what you had done and how that turned eventually into a business.
So while I was working at Theta, I still had roots in analog because I had worked at hi-fi stores around Los Angeles and had been setting up turntables. And I had another great mentor in Los Angeles named Randy Cooley,
Oh yes.
who owned a store and mentored me a lot in the area of listening,
Right.
how to listen, what to listen for, and I also had access to a lot of fantastic equipment.
Yeah.
And it was an appointment-only facility, so I had these opportunities to compare a lot of equipment, see what I liked, see what I didn't like, what made me get drawn into it, what
Mm.
maybe pushed me away or became fatiguing.
Mm.
And at at that time, I had a Koetsu Rosewood Signature, and there were no phono stages in the market that could actually handle it
Okay.
because digital had pretty much taken over the entire market.
Yes.
There were few LPs being produced, few turntables, very few cartridges being made, but I just loved this cartridge. There were no phono stages.
Yeah.
And so while I was sitting there assembling, I sort of
Mm.
designed this phono stage because as an assembler, it's not necessarily using your, it's a lot of repetitive tasks. So I was
Yeah.
able to kind of think about it at the same time. And and then I built a prototype just for me. It was just kind of on one chassis and very Frankensteinish, wires running everywhere.
Yeah.
And it had lots of hum, lots of noise, lots of problems. But it basically worked. And I played it for a friend, and he said, "Oh my God, you have to make this."
Yeah.
And so that was really the inspiration. That was my friend Jay Nakamura
Yeah. Yeah.
who said, "You really have to make this."
Yeah.
And so I just continued on the project and made it into a sellable product,
Yes.
a two box. By separating the power supply out, got rid of all the hum and noise because that on one chassis it just wasn't going to work. And and played it for a few friends around Los Angeles, and then they would tell friends, and they would tell friends, and I had built a relationship with a distributor, an importer named Musical Surroundings in the United States, and he absolutely loved it. And he was actually an importer of and distributor of cartridges and turntables, also back at the time when there was
Yes.
very little analog. So
Yeah.
obviously we had that synergy,
Yes.
and so he had dealers, and he was essentially my sales agent for the U.S. Because remember, I was working at Theta at this time. This was on the side and in my house, and I would just do it nights and weekends as a labor of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And word of mouth and musical surroundings, Garth Lear promoting it, and it just grew little bit by little bit. And I was completely fine with that. My dedication was really to Theta in a professional capacity.
Sure.
I never really anticipated leaving Theta. I thought that would
Mm.
be kind of my career.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, something really interesting. Normally, when we listen to equipment that's of an era, there's characteristics, both sonically and engineering characteristics, that define that era. And although equipment that sounds wonderful always, there is progression and
Yes.
evolution. However, with the IO, I was so shocked to find out that it was designed in 1993, because to this day, it still is one of the very best phono stages that we've ever heard. So a
Thank you.
big compliment to you.
Thank you. That's
Um,
very
and
kind.
and I think part of the reason might be, going back to what we said earlier, that you didn't spend your life studying traditional circuits. You put that together based on another experience, which, if you can elaborate how that came to be.
While I was at Theta and I was studying electronics, I knew my true passion was with tubes, and I had old Tektronix vacuum tube oscilloscopes, and I needed to fix them in order to use them, and I needed to understand the circuits. And so I would say that the IO is in some degree part Tektronix oscilloscope,
Yeah.
because some of the circuit design and problems they were solving were similar to what I was trying to achieve, which was very high gain, so it could handle the low output of a moving coil directly
Yes.
with minimal noise, minimal distortion, and so
Yeah.
forth,
Yeah.
but with all tube amplification.
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of that non-traditional approach allowed me to think out of the box. If I had a very traditional audio electronics engineering background, I don't think I would have been able to be quite as free thinking
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
solving those problems.
One of the quotes that I really love that you have that's come from you is that audio design is part science, part art. That no great audio product exists with one without the other. What sort of bred that quote? Because that's a really I totally wholeheartedly agree with that.
I think it really goes back to those early days at Optimal Enchantment, where I was able to see that a product that had marginally better distortion didn't necessarily sound better. That there was a lot to the reproduction of music and measurements that are correlated, and a lot that is not necessarily correlated. I do always try to achieve technical um, accuracy.
Yeah.
It's definitely a part of my ethos, but I see no great achievement in reducing distortion marginally better and saying it's a better product.
Yeah.
There's
Not
just much
everything can
more
be
to it.
measured.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, there are some defining principles that you used when you design products. Things like zero feedback,
Yeah.
robust power supplies, damped rigid chassis, etc. But there's something that I read where you also are a proponent of differential amplification.
hmm
And that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand what that means. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? And
Sure.
yeah.
So with traditional single-ended amplification, you have your signal and ground, and the signal is amplified relative to ground. So if it's coming in at this size, and then after the amplification stage, it might be this size. With differential amplification, we actually have two signals. You have what we might say a plus phase and a minus phase, or an antiphase. So while this one's going positive, this side is going negative.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is amplifying the difference between those.
Okay.
And so it sort of leaves ground out of that equation. And it allows for, when you're amplifying these, because you're amplifying the difference, if you're picking up things that are in common between them, they're getting canceled out. So you might be picking up some noise or some hum fields or something like that, but they're getting canceled out by the differential amplification. And it has the negative in that it's a more complex signal path. For example, if you have a balanced input on a preamplifier and it's seeing the volume control first, you effectively need two volume controls, because you need to control the volume of both phases at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're talking about more complex circuitry, more components, and so forth. But you also have the benefit of eliminating these common mode signals and so forth.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a no-brainer. I was doing it from the very beginning of the company in 1993. Everything was balanced. Just to be excruciatingly clear, the IO has a single-ended first gain stage, but it's balanced from there on.
Yes.
But everything else is balanced in. From that early stage, it was just something. It was again part of my ethos.
Yes.
Part of my belief system. Again, a lot of the stuff, and if you look at the old Tektronix oscilloscopes, there's a lot of differential amplifiers and so forth. So it just it's only grown as we've increased the problems in our environments. Poor AC coming in, a lot of RF in the environment, a lot of fields. A differential amplifier or a balanced stage component from
Yes.
input to output definitely rejects a lot of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So those
yeah.
are, it's,
Mhm.
I guess my point is it's only gotten more important over time.
Absolutely. Well, I've also noticed that you've embraced transistors and various technologies for some aspects of your design, like the power supply regulation, for example.
Sure.
But you still have chosen tubes for the amplification of the audio signal voltage.
Yes.
I'm sure you've experimented a lot, and so how have you ended up with that design philosophy there?
It kind of, again, goes back to those early days at
Yeah,
Optimal Enchantment,
yeah.
listening to all the equipment in the store, and I gravitated toward the tube equipment.
Mm,
We were a large, he still is a very large audio research dealer.
yes.
And so I was able to hear a lot of audio research and other
Mm,
equipment, other tube equipment, and it's what
mm,
sounded the most correct to me and drew me
mm,
in. I could listen all day because I
mm.
spent so much time there. And so pretty much ever since then, I had vacuum tube
Yeah.
preamps and phono
Okay.
stages. And on a technical basis, with a tube, you have a very large voltage, and if you're operating that in a relatively small range, which is what typically happens in the preamp
Mm.
small signal world, you get very linear response without feedback.
Mm.
A lot, the kind of linearity you can achieve with triodes is when properly designed, is
Yes,
really something. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
And when properly designed is probably a pertinent
Yes.
comment there. That's fantastic. Um, you made a comment once in an interview in the US where you were discussing hi-fi versus high-end. And you defined hi-fi as a medium which allows you to enjoy music. But high-end was a medium that transported you, that was visceral, that was a palpable experience. So uh, how do you achieve that? How do you create goosebumps?
um, it really starts with the power supply
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
Uh, I I I would say I focus on power supply to uh, to a fault. You know, it really is that important to
Yeah.
me, and we do things in our power supplies that are economically questionable, yet
Yeah.
sonically achieve things that are fundamentally important to me.
Not a good business case.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Thankfully, there's no one looking over my shoulder, um, but
Mm.
just that ability to
Mm.
draw one into the music and kind of forget about um, the taxes that need to be done or what have you
Yeah.
is what I hope to achieve.
Yeah.
And uh, there's really no aspect to the product that doesn't affect that.
Yeah.
So
It's
it
like
needs to
the
be a balanced.
cumulative effect of many,
Yes,
many things
exactly.
that are all working together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That sort of every aspect, any one aspect can bring down the product.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it all needs to be kind of at that level.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And that's one of the reasons I think that your equipment sounds so good. Now, you've been doing this for virtually 3 decades.
Yeah,
Are you still enjoying it?
absolutely. Yeah, I can't imagine something that would have been more fulfilling for me,
Yeah, that's.
especially as this was a dream from a very young age.
Oh, we hope you keep enjoying it.
Thank you.
I've got a very serious question now. Now, you
Yep.
seem to have named all your products after moons of Saturn and Jupiter. Is that because you've got some strange boyhood dream of being an astronaut?
Nope. It simply came out of uh, in my family. We would sit around the dinner table playing a board game called Solar Quest. You'd fly around the solar system and get trapped in individual planets going on
Yeah,
each moon
yeah.
until you ran out of gas. And so I learned all these moons, and it just stuck with me as a cool naming convention for
Yes,
products. The
yes.
names always stuck with me.
Wonderful.
The Greek.
Well, maybe we can pitch to NASA with the upcoming Artemis project that Aesthetics can be the the stereo on board.
Let's do it.
That's great. Well, the time has come finally for us to do our little 10 quick questions at the end of the interview. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions, and they're usually sort of one-word answers or fairly brief. So are you ready for this?
We'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, what is your favorite word?
Word. Asymptotically.
Okay. We'll have to look that up. What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
Hate. If you could use one word to describe a great sounding system, just one word, what would it be?
Just one?
Just one.
Man.
Yeah.
Transcendental.
Transcendental. That's fantastic. Okay, that's very, very good. Do you prefer listening to digital or analog?
Analog.
As a political one? Oh, don't hesitate in
Nope.
answering that one. What sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise do I love? I love the oboe.
Yeah, okay. And what sound or noise do you dislike?
When a machine is running, you get chatter.
Yes.
When you're machining a piece
repetitive.
of metal. Yes.
Right, okay.
That's a horrible noise.
What is your proudest accomplishment?
Despite everything we've discussed in the company and products and so forth, it's really my family.
Your family?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you could just keep one album, so not a desert island collection, but just one album for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
That's a brutal question.
It is.
It's
impossible to answer?
Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
If I ask you in 5 minutes, it'll change, but what's in your mind right now?
Brahms's Fourth.
Okay. Great choice. If money was no object, how would you spend your time?
Nothing different. Maybe I'd ski a little bit more, but this has just been an incredible journey for me and a boyhood dream. And to be here in this environment, with people enjoying my equipment and coming and telling me that it has moved them in some way is all I've ever hoped to achieve.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. And finally, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I don't want to attempt anything else, but I have enjoyed since the pandemic. I've gotten a little bit into machining.
Oh, yes.
Hence my previous answer about chatter.
Yeah.
So that's been a fun sort of side journey.
Very sort of physical, creative process.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
And just learning it. I'm not a machinist by any stretch, but I've just enjoyed learning it.
Well, for the sake of the global music-loving community, let's hope that you do not do anything else with your life apart from what you're doing right now. I think we're all blessed to have people like you devoting their lives to making special equipment. So once again, thank you so much for visiting us and spending some time with us in this interview. And we hope that you have a really wonderful trip back to the US and upwards and onwards.
Thank you, George. This has been wonderful.
Thank you
really
very
enjoyable.
Much. Thank you.
Appreciate it.